This moment, the 1966 24 Hours of Lemon, was sold to the world as an American triumph, a corporate giant's revenge. Ford had humbled Ferrari. But what if this iconic victory was built on a lie? What if the soul of the legendary GT40 wasn't born in Detroit's vast engineering centers, but in this modest workshop in Slough, England, built not by Ford, but by a quiet, stubborn genius named Eric Broadley? This is the story of a partnership forged in desperation and poisoned by ambition. It's the story of how the world's largest car company courted, absorbed, and then discarded a brilliant mind to steal his creation. And it's the story of the real car that emerged from the ashes of that betrayal. A machine so fierce drivers called it a bloody handful and loved it for the very reason Ford feared it. The prophet in Slough. Eric Broadley was not a corporate man. He was an artist whose medium was aluminum and whose church was the racetrack. In 1962, his vision was radical. A lightweight mid-engined Mk6 GT car. The Lola Mk6. This wasn't just a new car. It was a new philosophy. But why was this philosophy so dangerous? Because it made every front-engine Ferrari and Aston Martin look instantly obsolete. At the 1963 Lemon, the Mk6 driven by Richard Atwood didn't just enter the race. It qualified a stunning 7th overall, beating established giants. It screamed potential before its engine failed. That scream was heard across the Atlantic by a man with a wounded ego and an unlimited checkbook. Henry Ford, too. Ford had just been brutally rejected by Enzo Ferrari. The Dear Henry letter was more than an insult. It was a war declaration. Ford needed a weapon. But then he realized he didn't have the time or knowledge to build one from scratch. So they went shopping, and in a small English town, they found their blueprint. Not for sale, but for rent. The car taking shape beneath the fluorescent lights was the Lola Mk6 GT. To most, it looked radical, too low, too daring, too uncompromising to be real. But to Broadley, it was simply inevitable. He believed with unwavering conviction that the era of front-engine endurance machines was dying. The future, he insisted, belonged to balance, to agility, to engineering that placed the heart of the machine where it belonged, in the middle. When the Mk6 made its debut at Le in 1963, it did not finish. It sputtered, it faltered, and finally it surrendered. But while its engine fell silent, its impact thundered across racing's upper echelons. Teams and engineers whispered about the strange British car with the midnight soul. It was fast, astonishingly fast. And more importantly, it felt like a prophecy. Across the Atlantic, that prophecy was noticed by a man who understood humiliation more intimately than most. Henry Ford, too, the iron-jawed titan of American industry, had been publicly spurned by Enzo Ferrari, first by dangling the promise of selling his company, then by cutting negotiations at the final hour and mocking Ford's attempts to enter European racing. The slight festered into fury. Ford did not simply want to win. He wanted to destroy Ferrari at the one place the Italians considered sacred. The 24 Hours of Lemon. Ford needed a weapon powerful enough to carve its name into European asphalt. His executives looked toward England, toward the Mk6, and in its sleek Mk6 skin, they saw not a genius's masterpiece, but an opportunity, perhaps a shortcut. And so they traveled to Slough with checkbooks open and smiles carefully painted. Their proposal sounded like salvation. They offered a partnership, Ford Advanced Vehicles, right there in England. Broadley would serve as technical director. Together they promised to build the machine that would humble Ferrari. Broadley accepted. It felt like a dream. But even dreams cast shadows. Within months, the air inside Lola's factory changed. The Americans arrived with clipboards and agendas. Their boots echoed against the concrete floors like the march of an occupying force. The small English sanctuary that had once pulsed with pure invention now throbbed with the heavy machinery of corporate ambition. And though no one yet realized it, the first steps toward betrayal had already been taken. For in Slough two philosophies were about to collide. The intimate craftsmanship of a visionary and the unyielding appetite of an empire. And only one would survive intact. The absorption partnership as Splendor in 1963. Ford Advanced Vehicles FAV was formed in Slough. Eric Broadley was named technical director. It seemed like a perfect marriage. Broadley's genius, Ford's resources. The first product was to be the Ford GT, the car that would become the GT40. But the marriage was a sham from the start. Ford didn't want a partner. They wanted a template. Ford engineer Roy Lunn later admitted, "We used the Lola Mk6 as a starting point. The first GT40 chassis was practically identical. They bought Lola's patents, his prototypes, even his raw materials." Broadley's small team was suddenly inundated with Ford personnel. Broadley believed he was there to engineer. But then Ford's corporate machine arrived. They demanded changes for production ease, not performance purity. They valued speed of development over engineering elegance. Broadley, a perfectionist, clashed constantly. He watched in horror as his project was taken over. After just 18 months, the relationship shattered. Broadley walked away. Ford kept everything. The factory, the staff, the intellectual property, the half-built cars. The architect was evicted from his own blueprint. John Wyer, the legendary team manager who later ran the GT40 program,